The title of this year's report is The Growing Divide. Why the growing divide? 2 weeks ago I moved houses. The house where I now live is less than 10 minutes from the house that I previously lived in Māori. Despite their closeness, I've noticed some sharp differences between the two neighbourhoods. The neighbourhood we now live in is by no means rich or affluent neighbourhood. It's really, I guess you'd call it a one-step up middle-class neighbourhood, a mixed neighbourhood comprising young couples managing to buy their first homes and older people who have lived there for a long time. But what has struck me is the difference in those two neighbourhoods. Where we lived in Māori, the school was a Decile 1 school. Where I'm now living, just a short way away, it's a Decile 10 school. Our old street had people, not cars, living in the garage. The new street has a car in every garage. In our old street, the majority of houses, in fact all of the houses in the street that I lived in, had more than one family living in them. In our new street, there's only one family to a house. In the new neighbourhood, people go for a jog, I notice, in the morning, and they're often dressed nicely in labelled clothes and pushing nice pushchairs with their children. In the old neighbourhood in the morning, you would often see people returning from night shift and swapping over with somebody else who was rushing out to go off to work. And children who are either being carried or transported in very old and worn out pushchairs. Within two neighbourhoods so close, I've noticed a chasm of difference and a growing divide between, in this case, the poor and middle-class cousins who actually perhaps are not earning a great deal more. New Zealand has always had a divide between the people in its cities. There's always been a noticeable divide between the whānaus of Aotearoa and the families of Remuera, between Aranui homes and Fendleton homes, between the neighbourhoods of Oriental Bay and Porirua. But what we are now seeing is a dramatic deepening of the divide, and that's causing this divided nation. A huge chasm appears to be opening up right at the boundary between neighbourhoods formerly close in type, housing, facilities and income. This divide is occurring because for a group of New Zealanders, they're getting poorer and poorer. They're disenfranchised, they're marginalised, and they're more separated from that part of New Zealand where decisions are made. New Zealand is dividing. One of the responses often heard by politicians, economic commentators and those who are influential when challenged with this and when increases are asked for an assistance and some addressing of the people who are in need. There's often, they make a sort of comment which says, well, people have got to live in the real world. But I guess the question is, what is the real world? Is it the world of the corporate executive, the media commentators, who talk a lot about the serious current deficit, growing government spending, high taxation, productivity problems, global economic uncertainty, or the need for flexibility in the labour force? They're problems, they certainly are problems. They are problems of the real world for sure. But often I find that those who advocate for those problems are a bit slow and perhaps a little dismissive of those who try to point to other issues as well that need to be set alongside those in the real world. Such people are right, this is the real world, and these are issues that need concentrated attention. The only difficulty is that in the divided world, their real world is only half of the real world. And when you're on the other side of the divide, it's often difficult to see and grasp the problems on the other side. The mistake made is to think that what you see on your side of the divide is the totality of the real world, and therefore live with a misguided concept that says if we address our issues, it will lead automatically to a change in New Zealand. The benefits will flow over, and suddenly things will change. They believe that what they see as the particular is also the general. In fact, it is only half the view. Their view is the world through only one lens of the real world's glasses. and only sees dimly the other side of reality. In a dividing New Zealand, it's important to realise that both sides of the divide make up the real world and the issues to be addressed. To talk of the world or New Zealand from one side of the divide is extremely dangerous and foolhardy. Information, the issues and the realities of both sides of the divide are essential in gaining a real grasp on the problems of New Zealand. Recently, we've listened to some State of the Nation reports from our leading politicians, which have allegedly been talking about the state of the nation. They seem to me to have been talking a lot about economic issues and not much about anything else. Few of us would deny the importance of government fiscal deficit, but what is disheartening in recent political speeches is an implication that this is the only deficit that matters. Other deficits are not actually discounted, they're simply not mentioned. The emphasis is on reducing debt, easing taxation, roads and transport, productivity, a flexible labour force, important issues, but not a balanced view. The Salvation Army, through the State of the Nation report, wishes to paint this year a picture from the other side of the divide in an attempt to contribute to a more complete picture of the real New Zealand, the real world. On this side of the divide, the important and life-consuming issues are different: to address family violence, to address the needs of victims of crime, to find alternatives for a failed prison system, to deal with inadequate housing, to address youth disillusionment, and to beat youth unemployment and to ensure that real answers are given that will defeat poverty. This State of the Nation is not only released to engage the nation, but also to remind us in the Salvation Army what we need to concentrate on in the next 12 months. Challenged by the issues of this report, we intend to concentrate in 2012 to find ways in which we can implement solutions and provide new ways of responding to need. We will do that through innovation in our services, but an even more concentrated campaign to advocate for policy change and the targeting of the policy issues that create such devastation for people and families in New Zealand on the poorer side of the economic and social divide. Our campaign will involve speaking about needing to build more social housing and advocating government and others for a greatly increased supply of affordable social housing. Present policies are too light and too slow. We applauded last year promised initiatives, and we still believe that some of those initiatives have some possibility, but the results are less than pleasing, often failing because they're being implemented from a first world view into a second world problem. The answers don't fully deliver or realise the urgency of the situation. We also will redouble our efforts to speak up to local and national politicians and to officials of government to ensure that the excellent report of the Law Commission on Alcohol is more completely implemented. The disastrous alcohol purchase laws in this country need to be tougher, and a tax on alcohol is essential. The Salvation Army will speak into the process of welfare reform, to pressure for a system of income support, real jobs, housing, healthcare and education that leads to a substantial reduction in children in poverty. In the real world of New Zealand, poverty is one of the greatest threats to New Zealand's economic and social future. It is a national disgrace that we have no actionable plan as a nation to change that situation. On the other side of the divide, an essential issue is transport, a vital issue, and local national politicians are working hard to develop and implement plans for national roading and transport that deals with overcrowded roads and hinders the transportation of goods to market. This is to be commended, but where are the plans and actions from the same people and groups that will lead to the abolition of child poverty in 10 years? We desperately need deliverable plans for a total New Zealand to defeat poverty. It can be done. It is being done in other places. Each morning on the radio, when share prices, the value of the dollar and the interest rates are outlined, perhaps we also need an economic measure in New Zealand about the rise and fall in the number of children in poverty. The Salvation Army is seeking to change this. In the real world on the lower divide, the tragedy of young men spending vital years of their earning and parenthood in prison must be turned around. On the back of this report, we will advocate for policies that provide alternatives to prison, more mental health and addiction services, policies that have prisoners who are incarcerated working and building the skills that will enhance their rehabilitation possibilities. The growing divide statistics that Alan will shortly outline show that the present policy approaches are not significantly changing things for people on the lower divide. And you add to that, of course, the divide amongst the people of Christchurch. Half the city is getting on with rebuilding their lives because they have the personal and financial resources to do so. Half the city is locked into indecision, loss and frustration and distress. And so we need collective action from the council and government to address this appalling situation, because it's only deepened by that sort of situation. More vision, creativity and energy is needed to develop real-world solutions that make a difference in these vital areas. The extent to which more and more New Zealanders are becoming disconnected from the mainstream of New Zealand life must be a cause for action. We have two clear choices. One is to continue the path we have been on for more or less continually for the past 3 decades, concentrating wealth and influence and driving the marginalised further into the shadows with a more restrictive welfare net and a yet more punitive criminal justice system. The other is to act more inclusively and to work consciously and deliberately at ways of ensuring that the most marginalised New Zealanders, and in particular many poor families and unemployed young people, feel as though they are valuable and valued members of our society. The statistics which Alan will now share with us, I trust will energise us to do more, and I hope will be a stimulus for government, politicians, business leaders and community leaders to place new emphasis on finding solutions for the real world of New Zealand's poor and disenfranchised. And so we present to you the report, A Dividing New Zealand.